let's continue with the program here, and this is something I look really forward to get these experiences from the decided climate regulation from the industry. So what should we focus on in our Nordic harmonization, and how has it been received, what works well and less well? And also if the presenters get the question if they can give also proposals on harmonizations. So we will start up here with the NREP in Denmark and Norgehus in Norway and Skanska in Sweden. So first of all with Christian Mölholm and Marcus Hedman, they will start. So please welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having us. We have been very excited to come here and talk about our experiences with the LCAs. And we'll definitely give you a little insights on where we are and what experiences we have and what kind of challenges we'll see. We have a little bit of an agenda with us. But first, we'll do just a quick intro to who we are, what NREP are, but also who Marcus and I am. We have 20 to 30 years of experience from the construction industry and consultant industry. And
Per person.
Per person, yeah. And also as a building owner, so we have quite a strong experience, and we also both work with as sustainability managers within NREP, and we guide and oversee projects, potential investments, and development projects in meeting our company targets on embodied emissions and on operational emissions from the operation of the buildings. So yeah, we have a little bit of an agenda. We'll just give you a very quick intro to NREP and who we are and ambitions on decarbonization and what's the status. And then we're also going to jump into it on the LTA side. What are the challenges and stuff like that. And some of the variables and methodologies that we see and are facing across the countries that we operate in. Okay. Who are we? We are part of Urban Partners. Urban Partners is an investment company, and NREP is where we do the investments in buildings, and we also have some other sister companies that are more involved in finance and in also in direct investments in potential solutions in the building industry. So we have assets across the Nordics and also in Poland and Germany, and we also starting to look into other markets in England, for instance. We are 400 people across the organization in NREP, and we have investments for more than 19 billion euros. So quite a big player in the market. We have different concepts or different investments we do. We do investments in both the residential sector, in logistics, and also in the office segment and the care segments across these countries. And we have different concepts that we have lined up. We have UMIS concept, which is a concept for students, as student investment, and we also have other residential concepts. We are very ambitious on the decarbonization journey. It's a big thing for the company to be a part of decarbonizing the industry and the built environment. So we have already set targets for decarbonization of our portfolio, also for where we want to go in the future. And obviously, we also have had a long-term focus on this, and we have done a lot of work to and are still doing a lot of work to kind of gather data across our portfolio and get insights on how our buildings are being operated and how our development projects progressing on meeting our targets, and that's an ongoing struggle for us to kind of get data across all countries. As you also realize, the regulations and the legislation across the countries are very differs a lot, and so we're also facing some issues in getting all our countries and markets to kind of operate in the same direction. Speaking, for example, doing LTAs. So where are we on the decarbonization path? We have addressed this. Back in earlier this year, we disclosed our first GHG report, going more into the details on where we are going, and we have highlighted that most of our emissions are actually coming from the construction of the projects that we are doing, and that's a huge challenge for us, and we will continue to, and that's actually continues the work that we are doing, but that also continues the discussions here that we need to do a lot of stuff also in the future, and we need to lower the bar and have more work to do on that. So that Marcus, that will kind of lead us to some of the challenges that we have when we operate this. So I'll pass it over to you, Marcus.
Thanks. So some of the challenges we are facing are very similar to the ones we have heard before. I think the analysis that has been done on the Nordic level is very similar to our opinion on this. But this is, I think, a Sweco report showing the difference using different methodology across the Nordic, or Sweden, Finland, Denmark. So this is the outcome from the same building compared. So of course we are challenged by not being able to compare results cross borders. We might also draw the wrong conclusions and have the wrong solutions based on wrong data. We are also forced to use local consultants who understands the local methodology. And this, of course, results in some loss of transparency. We think also higher cost and less efficient. So the variables, I think, has been mentioned before. We see the same area definitions, buildings parts included, biogenic CO2, how to calculate that, EPD type, generic versus specific, and also constant EPD improvements among the suppliers. So we need to keep up with fetching the latest EPDs. So area definition, many countries use gross floor area. In Sweden we have been facing an a temperated area. So here are some differences. It's just to showcase that the result could be very different depending on what area you split, of course, the calculation on. Biogenic CO2 we think are quite tricky as well. We can hear some countries discussing to introduce factors, how to calculate biogenic carbon. Is it a correct assumption to think that all wood is burnt end of life, or is actually some wood recycled? And I think it's so small, Christian. I think also to mention the D modules that actually handle the recycling potential. It's not used in any country that we know of. So if it's not in the scope, there will be no drive in this recycling question, we think. So here's an example of EPD that we are not really a fan of generic figures. for us, generic data is not very useful. So the first thing we check with the consultant when we have a new LCA is what kind of data is used. Is it generic? We ask them to redo it and we can supply a list of preferred suppliers that we would like to see in the calculation. But it's like comparing it to a cost calculation. To do a cost calculation for a project on generic data has no value for us. It's the same thing here. And here you can see the difference. It's roughly between 30 and 40% to save by using specific EPDs from the best suppliers. And this constant EPD improvement, it's something we call market decarbonization. So even if we are expected to do different things, we need to think maybe more hybrid solutions, but we are also very sure that our suppliers will decarbonize, meaning we will have a market decarbonization without us doing anything. And here's a product-specific example of a sandwich element that we use for logistic building outer walls, and it actually has dropped 56% in 2 years on EPD level. So we see a very rapid development on EPD. And the big question is, of course, will it continue or will it be a hockey stick, or how would the curve look for the coming years? We think it's kind of a catch-up effect in this. So many people now shaking the bottle. In maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 years, we will have a lot of ketchup coming out. And our solution to these problems we are facing is to introduce our own methodology, you could say. So we implement science-based targets with a defined methodology. So by using science-based targets, are able to compare over borders. So one methodology, not dependent on national regulations. There are many upsides with this, but of course also some downsides in form of we need to do 2 calculations in every country. So we need to of course, follow the national standard and national regulation in all countries, and also do the SBTI calculation. It's also a reduced scope to many countries. So we focus only on A1 to A5 in science-based targets. And it's not allowed to use biogenic carbon. So some reflections, Christian. So we can see that there is a need for an European harmonization. It's good that the Nordic countries, of course, do something together here, but we can also see it for us. It would be very good if we have a European change on this, or European regulations. And I think it's very positive to see that we might have something 2030. But the question for us is then, is that sharp enough to actually drive us where we want to go? We promise our investors to be the leading company in this area. LCAs are based on variables, many assumptions, many different figures. So in our organization, we face people from Finland and Denmark talking about kilos and have completely different scopes, but they still think it's comparable. And we also, of course, could see that we do a lot of renovations. From the statistics, we can see that 60 to 70% of all material that is produced go into renovation. And this is out of scope. So we are focusing a lot on new construction of new buildings, but maybe missing out on a very big chunk. I think that was Was it the last? I think so, yes.
Yes.
Do you want to add something, Christian?
No, yeah. It's just a quick comment. It's very important to realize that, as you also, all, I'm sure you're familiar with, but as we try when we speak to our colleagues, we kind of when you talk on LCAs and how the methodologies are, and it's very important to remember that an LCA is based on, it's like a weather forecast. You can do weather forecast in many ways, and in many. If you don't like one weather forecast, you could look on another weather forecast. and every day is where we are, and we need to put a big push on this, and we also need to harmonize on this, and that's one of the concerns we have, that we are running in many directions, and but we can't really compare apples with apples and what have you. So, yeah.
We were also asked to actually reflect on us being a big company and how would it differ to being a small company.
Yeah.
And we think that the difference might not be that big, since we do it in the same way, meaning that we all use advisors. Also, small companies, of course, use advisors when they do an LCA. So we think actually it's the same consultants we use, being big as being a small company. So it should harmonize.
Mm.
Thank you very much, Marcus.
Thank you.
For this.
You're welcome.
We have time for a short question.
Hey, Tove from Stockholm, KTH. So you didn't really mention the relation here between the limit values that we heard in the last session that has been introduced in Denmark. Could you comment anything related to that? Are all your new construction far beyond below already?
Yeah, we think, of course, it's super good with the Danish limit values. It helps us a lot. And I think our science-based targets, they sit just below. So we are close. I think we have discussed the possibility to actually use the voluntary low emission class instead. But I would say maybe we're performing, we're on safe ground, I would say, but we think still it's super good and to have these ambitious targets. Because our discussion with the contractors gets much easier when we have a push from the government.
Okay, thank you very much. We need to proceed, and we will have more time for discussions after lunch, of course. Thank you.
Thank you.
So now we will continue to get some experiences from Norway, and we will have Bent Toscher, who is working at Norgehus, presenting their experiences. Please, welcome.
Yes, hello. My name is Ben Toscher. I work as the head of sustainability at Norgehus. I come from the center of Norway, around the Trondheim area. Melhus is where we have our head office. I work with a lot of different things as the head of sustainability, all from energy effectivity to circular economy. But today I'm going to talk about our experience with the climate regulation in Norway. First, a little bit about Norgehus. Norgehus is a franchise concept which consists of approximately 150 independent contractors and developers across the entirety of Norway. Plus, we have a couple in the Faroe Islands, and we're expanding to Iceland. What that means is these are legally separate entities. They're contractors, but they're franchisees in our concept. What does our concept consist of? A lot of things, but a few of those things are we design and develop architecture, engineering, tools, services, marketing, in information technology infrastructure and housing catalogs. And these housing catalogs, they are useful if someone's going to build a single family home or a row house, for example. They can look through this housing catalog and be inspired and use one of our contractors to build it. We have an engineering office which consists of about 40 plus engineers and architects that I work with in Melhus. And our contractors have built over 25,000 housing units over the past 35 years. And we build everything in Nordic, everything from single family homes to kindergartens to schools, etc. And it has averaged about 1,000 housing units per year. Right now, there's a bit of a crisis in the industry, so that number is significantly lower. And when we compare ourselves to our competitors, other what you might call in Norwegian ready house producers, housing producers, we're the first to have calculated the climate footprint to create climate declarations for our housing catalogs. So a housing catalog consists of approximately 45 models of single family homes and around 40 models of vacation homes. We did this in-house. I've been responsible for this work and I've led a team of engineers to do it. So a little bit about the work and why we've done this. For the first, it's useful in marketing communications. We think both today's customers and those that want to build a house in the future are going to be interested in having a climate declaration for a single family home, even though it's not a requirement right now in Tech 17 in Norway. But in addition, we want to help our customers make better choices for the environment. So Marcus talked about market decarbonization. One thing I work with is both finding products from building suppliers that have the lowest possible carbon footprint and getting them into our standard calculations. And if it does result in a significant cost, helping our customers make those choices and putting a price tag on it. Way we've calculated the climate declarations, it's based upon the building code in Norway. We wanted to be in front of the change. Our view is that it's not a question of if, but when this will be required for the single family homes in Norway. And we also wanted to build up competence for our engineers and architects. So going forward, they can take some learning from this process so we can reduce the carbon footprint of what we designed. The modules that are included in these numbers I'm going to present to you are A1 to A3, A4, A5, B2, and B4. And this, again, has been done according to the guidance in the building code. I hope the numbers make sense, but it's a very valid point that right now it's very difficult to compare apples to apples before we harmonize and agree. So a little example of a report. This is I built a little tool to kind of quickly generate a report for each one of the climate declarations we have. But this consists of the building elements and the modules that are required in Norway. And this is has been useful for us when we have our housing catalog, kind of figuring out where the biggest contributors. A little bit on our experiences and findings. The first thing is we used a tool. It's a tool that's been developed in Norway called Reducer, and we've used their default assumptions for transport, which varies depending upon what type of material. For example, wood. I think wood products is about 300 kilometers versus steel. I think it's about 2,000 kilometers. But depending upon the product category, Reducer has default assumptions. There was a fair amount of time using to extract data from EPDs. Reducer does have an EPD library, but there were also products that were not in the library, which we needed to put in the library when we were making these climate declarations. And just some general experiences from this. It takes time and it can lead to errors. I've been trained in understanding the difference between the different greenhouse global warming potential indicators, but some of my engineer colleagues haven't. So as soon as they're confronted with GWP GHG versus GWP fossil versus GWP total, we might as well be speaking Greek. So those are some things to make note of. Again, here are the numbers. Maybe this makes sense to some of us. But anyways, what we found for our 45 houses, when we've calculated the carbon footprint according to Tech 17, the average was about 4.16 kilograms CO2 per square meter. And here, this is gross floor area in Norway. And for our cabins, 3.83 kilograms CO2 per year. And a little bit more about some specific findings. But before I go further, I just mention one thing. We're talking about the EPD. There's been good talk about EPDs. I agree with NREF and Marcus. We want to use product-specific EPDs to the greatest extent as possible. So in these calculations comprise of about 23,000 different product lines and about 300, of which there's only about 300 unique products. But among those 23,000 product lines, we had EPDs for about 85%, 15% generic values. But when it comes to individual unique products, so a product can be used several times, we had about a 65% coverage ratio for EPDs and 35% generic values. Many of these generic values came from the database in Boverket. A little bit more interesting findings. This might be old news for you guys here. Here are two models in our housing catalog. The first is Lund Moderna. The usable area, the heated area, is 105 square meters. In the built-up area, like the footprint of the building is 118 square meters. And here we have a carbon footprint of 4.92 kilograms per square meter, and a total carbon footprint about 28 tons over 50 years. But if we look at another model called Lundos Moderna, very similar, as you can see from the pictures, here there's actually another floor on top, and the usable area increases to 168 square meters, whereas the built-up area is roughly the same, 120 square meters. But the total amount of kilograms per square meter of usable area goes significantly down, significantly reduces, even though the total footprint is the same. So I thought that was an interesting finding, where if we have limit values which are based upon the total amount of kilograms per square meter, we have to take a step back and think, what is the bigger picture here, and what is the goal with regulation? But also, it kind of makes sense to build upwards if you're putting concrete on the ground. Another finding. Here's another model. This has to do with cement again. Here's a model called Fauna. This is a much smaller house. Here the usable area is about 70 square meters, built up area 77 square meters. And this is very interesting. If you look at the total amount of kilograms CO2 per square meter gross floor area, it comes in a little bit over 6. And when I compare that with with the 44 other models in our catalog, it's actually quite high. It's higher than 98% of the other models in the catalog. So if I'm a consumer, I'm thinking, ooh, this is in Norwegian, a miljøversten. In English, like, this is not a good choice. This is not an environmentally friendly choice. But at the same time, if you look at the total footprint, it's about 23 tons of carbon dioxide, which is lower than 95% of the other houses. I thought that was interesting. And then when you look at the same model, which we've designed with, instead of using concrete, we've used steel pier foundations, we see that the total, the carbon footprint goes down for across both metrics, both per square meter and total tons. So what are the implications? The first thing I want to say, what I'm going to discuss, these are my views, and to an extent represent the views of Norges Hus IS, not necessarily the 150 contractors that I interact with on a daily basis, but some of the things I'm going to talk about have to do with my experiences interacting with them. So first, obstacles. There is a great amount of inexperience with carbon numbers and what they mean. Even if you ask me, it was like, Ben, can you put into context what this means with 6 kilograms per square meter per year? Yeah, I might talk about how many flights that is a round trip from here to Trondheim, but still, it's new for many people, and I think there. I'm going to go into it in a little bit, but I think the work with the, I don't know whether it's 7.2 or 7.5, with some of the coming delegated acts to put these in context of national plans and national goals towards neutrality will help people understand. Cost benefit of a declaration, there's little perceived value unless you have a building owner that wants to reduce the carbon footprint. A lot of the contractors I speak with, this is just another cost that they have to deal with. But if you have an owner that really cares about it and wants to make better choices, it could be valuable. It's not currently a requirement for all buildings. Our case is a little different. We wanted to be ahead. We have the resources to have someone like me to look at this stuff. Not everyone does. And then biogenic carbon. In Norway, we have to do this instantaneous oxidation of biogenic carbon. It leads to a lot of confusion very quickly. I often see it from certain producers of building supplies. They make certain claims. Often, if they have a wood-based product, I'll deal with a contractor. Someone will say, what's a wood-based product? This must have the lowest carbon footprint. But according to how we have to relate to the rules and requirements, that's not the case. And there are cases of products in the market that are not wood-based that have a lower carbon footprint due to high recycled content as raw materials. What can we do to make it easier for developers and others? I think there's been a lot of effort here, but clear nonpartisan signals and commitments about future regulatory requirements so we could plan. There's been a lot of good work done in this area, a lot of reports through the Nordic Climate Construction Forum Network. So a lot of what I'm going to say, they're not just my thoughts. Other really smart people in this room have studied these issues and recommended things. One of these things is looking at a bottom-up approach for building stock monitoring. I'm a proponent of that approach when it comes to setting threshold levels. You could read about that in the report here, decarbonization of the building stock. A national database to submit climate declarations in machine-readable format. I think this is necessary to monitor progress over time. And once limit values are in place, I think reporting early in the project planning. In Norway, it's just to get the certificate of completion. But if you have someone that's never dealt with this before and they get a building permit and they're along the way and they come to me, they come to us and say, hey, can you guys do a climate declaration? Like the building's done in 2 weeks. When we find out actually it's over the limit, that's kind of a problem. So I saw this idea suggested. I think it's smart. Have it also in an earlier phase, in addition to as built, and then standardized machine-readable EPDs. Harmonization. I'm almost done here. Mandatory EPDs will help for increased digitalization. I'm not totally into the CPR, but if there is some sort of requirement that these EPDs are machine readable, so people like me, so you don't have people like me reading the PDFs and making a mistake, that's a good thing to do. A requirement to submit a declaration in a machine readable format, I hope that would be given with a database. And what should be the focus of harmonization? Biogenic carbon and how it influences the results, it's a big deal. GWP indicator, this should be harmonized, but it depends upon what we do with biogenic carbon. I'm kind of the view just to do that so-called 0-0 approach, make things a lot simpler. A uniform conservative methodology if you're using generic data, 25%. And that's because I think we need to incentivize building producers to produce product-specific EPDs. And ideally, they should be competing upon the values within their EPDs. System boundaries, very important. We harmonize on this. B6, big deal. Influences the results significantly. Separate threshold. This was another idea I heard in this webinar that was a few days ago. For where you have scenario-based modules like B6, and they're scenario-based, you can use different emissions factors on scenarios. Maybe there should be separate threshold values for those, unless there is a standard scenario that everyone has to operate under. If we can't agree upon threshold values, then a template for machine-readable declarations. So over time, we can begin to compare stuff as regulations change. And then a bigger question, what's more important here? Is it kilograms per usable area? Is the total kilograms something to think about in the broader context of the goals we have? And then standardized assumptions for transport waste, och så vidare, etc. All of this to help kind of harmonize and enable apples to apples comparisons. Yeah, that's what I had.
So thank you very much, Ben. We have time for one question, if there's some. Anyone? Yeah.
Nice presentation, Mikko from Rakli, Finland, the building owners and construction clients. Well, the thing that when to accept the values, like does it come in the permit phase or later, and you could verify the result from a legal perspective. I mean, there's a good argument to both sides. Like for that, what you presented, that you must be sure that this goes under the values. But on the other hand, we have discussed a lot that when you apply for a building permit, you have done in many cases in different buildings, you haven't done the design you have done constructual design, so it's kind of a early phase to verify the results. So there are kind of good reasons for both opinions. Just a comment.
Yeah, I think I think that's a valid comment. I don't have the answer, but maybe some combination of both. I think some sort of mechanism to reconcile these two, because we have engineers and architects. So we're in. If we go back to that graph that Ingun presented, we're very early on in that big hump, and so for us to get in as early as possible before they even apply, we could see how it's helpful in the long run.
Yeah, but when you manage a construction process, you wouldn't want to do waste in design, like design a lot in the permit phase. That doesn't really happen. It's just speculation. It's just speculation because of this the value. So there's a limit argumentation for both sides. In any case, you have to be aware that you are guiding towards the limit value, under the limit value.
We need to proceed, and I think we take that with us to the afternoon's discussion. Thank you very much, Ben, for your presentation. So we will introduce Jeanette Svede Lundin at Skanska, and she will give their view on climate declaration on possibilities and challenges. Changes.
A little bit of both. So, my name is Jeanette Svede Lundin and I work for Skanska Sweden. And I've been at Skanska since 2008. And that's when we started calculating carbon footprints for our projects. Because we have a really good sustainability manager that realized that we have to be able to calculate carbon footprints for our projects the same way as we actually calculate costs. And a couple of years later, I think he was quite right. But then you think this is a walk in the park for us with the new regulation. But this is very complicated. And I agree with everyone that's been talking here before. This is complicated. A little bit about Skanska. Skanska is a worldwide company. And we are also in the Nordics. The headquarters is in Stockholm, where I sit. But the Nordic market is very important, as you can see here. But Skanska Sweden, which I represent, the business unit Skanska Sweden, we are both contractors, we are developers, and we also actually manufacture materials. So we are a big part of the value chain here, both to fulfill the legislation, but also to reduce the carbon footprints. And with that said, I will share some experiences from the regulations. I will tell you a little bit about the challenges that we see. I think a lot of things has been said. And I will also point out some opportunities and what I think is very important to harmonize. But the challenges here, I think we've been discussing this quite a lot. You know, this is the questions that we get from our projects, because I want to be clear how this is not a pilot project that we're doing. We're doing this in all our projects. And I'm sorry, all the consultants is in here, but we can't use a specialist or a consultant in each and every project. This is the knowledge that has to be in the projects, project managers, every step of the way in the building process. They are brilliant. They really like working with carbon. They are committed to the carbon goals that we have. It's not optional, it's mandatory for them. It's to stay relevant in our business, I think. And they want to compare. They compare figures. But what does it mean? I think we've explained that a lot here. You start to compare and you want to use it. And they ask me, and I said, okay, you know, 320 kilograms per square meter. Well, then I asked, is it conservative data? Don't know. Okay, because then it's 20% higher. You know, you can't, it's not useful for them. It's too complicated. Another thing, our responsibility in this group, I think, is to actually make it easier for them to understand these figures and to harmonize it. And another comment that we get, it's, I found the best tool in the market. It gives us the lowest CO2. All right, you know, then everything is solved. We just have to change the tool. You see the complexity in this, because this is what we're trying to make decisions based on these figures. And there are plenty of tools on the market that can actually calculate carbon right now. And that's great. But the big issue is to control the in-data. What are we actually putting into these tools? Because the calculation itself is not the complicated part. It's to actually know what you put into the tool. And that's the real tricky bit, I think. Because if you want to reduce carbon in a very effective way, then you should just take away some building parts. And it goes down. And we like to compete. I think we all like to compete in our business. But it has to be a fair competition. So what's included in the declaration? If we say 100% of a building should be included, is it A model, 100% of the A model? Is it 100% of the construction model? Or if we say, is it 100% of the bare loading structural parts? Do you think we get the same results here? And we have to then try to describe what's 100% of the load-bearing structural part, because that's something we have to declare in the climate declaration. And then it comes to, if we have 1 square meter of high-density fiberboard here, that's the structure part, you know. And that's, you know, that 1 square meter, you can take it from a model, you quantity takeoff, you have 1 square meter. But if you actually calculate the materials that you need to have the function of this HDF, then you have a lot of more materials. You have the concrete, for example. Should this be included or not? And I think there are so many details in this. So when you really have to be very, very sure what's the data that you put into the calculation programs. This is just an example. We have a lot of questions, and I think Boverket has done a great job with this handbook that Christina showed. But when you really, really want to compare, you have to make sure that you have the same input. And that's the real challenge, I think. because it's a lot of data that we have to control and to be able to agree on. And for Skanska, we have connected. This is from the cost calculation program. We calculate each and every material that we have to pay for. And we don't pay for just the HDF, we pay for the whole thing. Otherwise, we can't build the building. And we also do the as-built. Because we're not interested in what we actually plan to do. We're interested in the results. And I think that's, I can't see it in any other way. But what we do know that there are a lot of changes during the building process and during the production here. And we have to keep track of all these changes to actually represent the as-built amounts of materials. And that is not very easy. You think, great, that you know exactly what you used. We follow the costs. We're great at following the costs, but to follow the changes in materials is not that easy always. We also have to keep track of how much materials have we actually used in a specific building. We might build a big project, might be 5 buildings, but we do a climate declaration for each building, so we have to keep track of this material is this building in this building part. Waste. When it comes to waste, we don't measure waste for a specific building part. We measure waste in fractions. You don't have a container for waste for a specific building part. So we can't measure waste per building part. That's not possible. And we also we have these verifications. We have to have verification on how much materials we actually used. And I think this is great because we do need to know what kind of materials we bought. But right now, there's a lot of manual work. It's time consuming. I just want you to respect that it's time consuming. It's a lot of data to get this right. And I want you to keep that in mind when you start comparing the figures from Boverket, for example. You said, Christina presented that we have these statistics for the Swedish climate declaration. To me, that's like, okay, that's a start, but you shouldn't draw any conclusion from this material yet, because I don't think we agreed on everything yet. There is a need of competence, of course. We've spoken about the EPDs, and we put this in the hands of our purchasers. You should decide now which supplier you should use. And you really have to know which data you should use here. And they are lost. There are so many mistakes made here. We have to make it easier for them, because we can't have a specialist in each and every decision here. So it has to be very, very clear what is the data here, because you get what is the results, because you get completely different values here. But with that said, I think this climate declaration that's put the climate is on everyone's agenda now. It's mandatory, and that's great. And some of the opportunities here, because there are a lot of opportunities. Digitalization, because we have so much information that we have to gather, we really need the digitalization. And there are a lot of work within our businesses to cooperation to solve this for us in an efficient way. Standardization, this is really a driving force in digitalization and standardization. And that's needed not only for the climate declaration, it's needed for many other reasons. And that's why it's a win-win for us. When we do work with the climate declaration, we get a lot of other information at the same time, which we actually want. So for us, it's just the driving force. So there are lots of opportunities here. And new cooperations, which we think is great, because no one can solve this by themselves. So what do we think about the needs? It has to be supervision here, because it's easy to make shortcuts. And I think the way we actually design this legislation and the limit values, in the coming limit values, it has to be possible to supervision. And then you have to, prepare for it. Because I think some companies, they are doing shortcuts here. It's just another value, just another cost. You ask a consultant, can you do this for us? They earn some money and they do it and they use it. I think we really have to make this usable for us and make it thoroughly. We have to agree on building parts. I think everyone has spoken about it, but I think you need to understand the differences. Where does the data come from? It doesn't matter as long as you sort of compare to yourself, but when you compare to others, it's a big issue, especially when it comes to limit values. If it's 310 or 305, well, depends on the in-data. I also think it's very important that we can see what the verified data. We have to have some quality indicator telling us how much of the data that we actually put into the calculation is verified. Because as a contractor, that's what we actually control. I also think it's very important that we can look at the results for each and every module, because A1 to A5, that's what we actually can control the most. So if we get one GVP for the whole life cycle, our project managers, they can't really use it. So we have to be able to see the GVP for each model, and then it has to be transparent and it has to be very common. All the scenarios used has to be very, very transparent. Otherwise, the figures doesn't mean anything. We've been talking, quite a few of us has been mentioning the EPDs, but also the quality of the EPDs, because I don't think it's fair that a product can actually reduce their carbon footprint by picking another program operator. We have to make sure that there is a fair competition here. And I think that's the responsibility of the authorities here, to make it easy for us to follow, because we want to follow and we want to compete, but it has to be a fair competition. And also, it has to be predictable, the roadmaps for the developing of the regulation, because the change in our companies take a lot of time. Everyone wants to change, but there are a lot of different information that we have to sort of connect to each other. The digitalization process takes a lot of investments, it takes a lot of time, so you have to respect that, I think. And you haven't given me the sign yet. Yeah, you did. Sorry. Because that's all for me.
Thank you very much, Jeanette. We have time for one short question. There, can we have a microphone?
Thank you for a very good presentation, very spot on. Skanska is a very big company, and at least when I worked at Skanska, you had pre-constructions modules like pre-walls, and you also have a own e-shop where you can bought material. Have you thought about, or maybe already done, that you have connected the CO2 emissions when you shop, when you use the shop, when you use Skanska's internal shop? Did you understand the question?
Yeah, it might have changed a little bit since you worked at Skanska, but yeah, that's one way of, because what we actually want to do, and I think everyone wants to do it. I think there are other in this room that also do it. You have to make it easier for the people making the decision at that time. They can't ask a LCA consultant or specialist, what should I do here? You know, you have to have it served. You have to be able to see these figures where you work.
But what I basically mean when the site manager order a specific wall or windows or gypsum boards or whatever, he make the click and he bought this from Skanska's internal shop, and then he got the CO2 values collected when he kind of doing the shopping thing. But you are not there yet, or
well, it depends on which systems which system you're talking about. But we are integrating it into our own systems. Yes.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, and we need to proceed. And thank you very much, Jeanette. So we will finalize this morning session with a presentation on upcoming regulation in Finland, in Estonia, and in Iceland. So a quick review on upcoming regulation in the Nordics. So please, Maria, welcome.
Thank you. My name is Maria Tioden. I work for the Ministry of the Environment in Finland. And as Christina told, so really short introduction or presentation about the situation in Finland at the moment. So the status, we have had some political changes which has delayed our Regulation and Climate Declaration Act. And at the moment, currently, the decree on the Climate Declaration and also the Construction Act amendments are under the notification, and in my presentation you can find the direct links to the TRIS system where you can find the translated version of the regulations. About the climate declaration and limiting values, so it has been proposed that those both decrees will be entered in the 1st of January 2026, so 1 year later than what was initially planned. Also, the climate declaration is given as a build phase. So when the building is ready and in a final inspection phase, the climate declaration needs to be given for the municipalities. The scope. The rule of thumb is that we have included almost all of the building types that are included also in the energy certificate regulation. So those are also affected by the climate declaration, except is that small family buildings are excluded. We have also excluded renovation projects and extensions, but there are also other building types that are not included, for example, holiday houses and churches and industrial buildings. Climate, what is in the climate declaration? So in Finland, we have included 2 separate topics or calculation themes here. So we have carbon footprint and also carbon handprint. Somebody mentioned about the module D, so this is not really the module D in the life cycle assessment calculation, but you can have that as a inspiration for our carbon handprint. So in our life cycle assessment, we calculate the A1 and to A5 modules. So the whole upfront emissions are calculated and included in the life cycle assessment. We have also Module B, we have integrated B4, so replacement of the products during the life cycle, and also the energy usage of the building. So B6 phase. And also the C module, so the end of the life of the building is included in the life cycle assessment. And then we have the potential climate benefits of the construction project, so the carbon handprint. So scope of the low carbon assessment, we do it for the building, and we do it for the construction area. So we do two separate calculations. The limiting value that will be given affects only the building. And building, we talk about the load-bearing frame, complementary parts, and also the building services. And then the building area, or the building site, is about the structures of the area and underground structures. And no limiting value is given for the building site. About the carbon handprint, so we have different components that are included in the carbon handprint. We have reuse, recycling, surplus renewable energy, carbon storage, and also carbonization. These are not summed together. They are presented as separate parts, and these are not aggregated from the carbon footprint. Deducted from the carbon footprint. And currently, we are working to draft a decree on limiting values. We will set the limiting values for each category of intended use of buildings. So, for example, apartment buildings will have a separate or different limiting values as the hospital, for example. And when setting the limiting values, we can take into account the specific situation in which achieving the limiting value, would be particularly difficult. For example, the area, or if there are some regulation or more strict regulation towards fire safety and that kind of situations. So my 5 minutes is up. Thank you. Do we have a time for questions?
Thank you very much, Maria. And then we will continue here with Hanna-Mari from from Estonia. So please welcome, Hanna-Mari.
Sorry. Oops, thank you. Hello and good day. It's very happy to see so many of you here in the audience. And I know that there are a lot of people behind the screen, so hello to you too. And today I'm here to give you an overview about the Estonian updates. And maybe I will introduce myself as well. My name is Hanna-Mari Seli. I am the head of sustainable construction at the Ministry of Climate. And a year ago at this forum, I talked about the Estonian ambitious targets related to renewable electricity, also about the climate law being brought to life. And today I can give you a little bit more details, what's coming. But before we go there, I would like to take a brief moment, to thank the Nordic Sustainable Construction Program and the Nordic LCA team to at least even have Estonia on the group, because it's a huge win for us, and hopefully you'll see it as a win for yourself too someday. And I wanted to say sincerely thank you, because we have learned so much from you. And without you guys, I think we wouldn't be as far today as we are. So thank you. And now let's see what's new in Estonia. So, firstly, we are starting to calculate our carbon footprint as of or from 1st of July 2025. And the idea is simple. Firstly, we just learn the calculation. And this calculation is for new buildings, which has more than 1,000 square meters of useful floor area. And then after we know how to calculate, we will also introduce this or widen the scope of calculation, and all the new buildings will start to do the calculation. And together with widening the scope, we also will introduce limit values as of 2030. However, those limit values today are not yet known. We will work on them. But yes, those will also apply to all new buildings. And we, in terms of EPBD, our take is that these limit values and the carbon footprint calculation should be only addressed for those buildings which are using energy to have this indoor air quality in place. But we need some, additional clarifications from the Commission to understand if our interpretation of the EPBD is correct or not. And now we can move on to the next phase. Of course, the calculation cannot be done without any tools, and the education is also one point. So what do we have today? We have a material emission factor database. There are approximately 120 or 130 materials data. This is the generic data. And it was developed by Tallinn University of Technology in close collaboration with members of Association of Construction Material Producers of Estonia. And this will be published this month. And also, there is a calculation tool currently in testing that will be also available, actually, even, if I may say, next week. And educational courses, as I mentioned, are a crucial part of the calculation. So currently, I know a university is putting together some courses, and they will be public for free at first, either at the end of this year or at the beginning of next year. And what else is to expect? Here is a brief timeline you can see, and currently the regulation for the carbon footprint calculation methodology is in preparation. Previous presentation was about the details. I don't have those details to share today. The modules still are not decided, but maybe next year I can tell all about it. And then we also have an ongoing project which aims to find out the initial limit values. But yes, we are just about to start the project, and university is again a big help at this point. What else to expect from next year is updating the database. Also, we are very eager about the delegated act by the Commission to be released next year, by the end of next year. And with that, we also have to have the readiness to update our methodology. And in 2027, according to EPBD, all the member states have to publish a roadmap that details the introduction of limit values on the total cumulative life cycle GVP of all new buildings. And as said before, 2030 is the year that we will introduce the limit values for all new buildings. And my last slide, before I forget, just to have something to look up for. Estonia is also planning to introduce carbon footprint calculation requirement of infrastructure. And what we mean under the infrastructure are the major or biggest road construction projects. And with that, we would need to develop a calculation methodology, update also our material emission factor database, develop also regulations, and the target is 2030 when we plan to start the calculation of road construction projects. That's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Hanna-Mari, for your update on Estonia's regulation. And now we have the last presentation here from Iceland. Please, Elin, welcome.
Yes, thank you. My name is Elin and I work at the Housing and Construction Authority of Iceland. Starting September 1st, 2025, climate declarations will be mandatory for a significant portion of new building projects in Iceland. And as you can see, the phases marked in green are the ones we are specifically asking for. After the initial implementations, we plan to introduce specific limit values for carbon emission by 2028, based on the data collected during the first few years. LCA submissions will be required at both design stage and at the final stage. And this two-step process ensures that sustainability goals are set early in the project and monitored throughout its life cycle. We've developed an LCA submission portal where project owners and designers submit their LCA documentations, including details about the structure. We also ask users to specify which software they used for their LCA. While the choice of software is flexible, this information helps ensure compatibility and accuracy in the submissions. The results of the LCA must be broken down by phases, providing a comprehensive view of the building's environmental impact, as well as supporting documentation should also be submitted. We provide Icelandic average values for use for different LCA phases, and these averages help guide LCA calculations when specific data isn't available. The values cover key phases like technical system, transport, construction, and end of life, along with emissions factors for energy use. During this adjustment period until September 2025, our focus is on collaborating with stakeholders, educating the market, and building the necessary experiences for smooth implementation of the upcoming regulation. Iceland is committed to transitioning to the construction sector to a circular economy by revising our building regulations to minimize waste and maximize reuse. As we continue our journey towards a more sustainable construction industry, it's essential to have a strong foundation in research and innovation. And to support this, in March of this year, we introduced a roadmap focused on shaping the research environment in the construction sector, with 16 key actions divided into 3 main parts: research, environment, dissemination of research results and experiences from the market, and testing of construction products. In conclusion, the upcoming LCA regulation and our commitment to a circular economy are key components of our sustainability efforts, and these are part of our Icelandic Sustainable Construction Roadmap to 2030. The roadmap outlines 74 actions aimed at reducing emissions and waste across 6 categories, and so far 33 actions have been completed. We are on track to update it by the end of the year, adding new actions aligned with upcoming EU policies to address emerging challenges. In closing, I want to extend our thanks to our Nordic partners, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Elin, for update on Iceland's regulation. And with this, we end this morning session, and I thank you all of your presentations, all the presenters, as really valuable input for the roundtable discussions in the afternoon. There's a lot of information, but I hope you have this context in your background when we're deep into this quite big question that we're about to discuss in the afternoon. So we will now end this streaming of this forum, and you will find the presentations, but also the recording of these sessions in the morning on the Nordic Sustainable Constructions webpage. So you will find it there. So I say thank you and goodbye for those of you who have participated digitally.